So I promised myself that I would be open as much as I possibly can on this podcast on all of my stuff. And I actually want to talk about something that is a real concern that, I do. Last night, I woke up in the middle of the night and, I was sort of stressed out and thinking about that. And that is trying to find um, good developers that will um, sort of see the same thing that I see. And this is the challenging thing that I do know. And the challenging thing is I'm pretty competent, I think, and I'd be able to do stuff. But the challenging thing is to find other people and then sort of realizing that they're not going to be at the same level. They're basically just not going to have the same training and things like that, which is that's okay. I completely understand that. Um, but then it's also trying to figure out how do you do this with a very, very limited budget that you don't have access to, right? So the Reciprocity Project is 100% funded by essentially myself. My wife gives me permission. Um, she's amazing that she's allowed me to do this for as long as I have, and I feel really awful about spending as much as I have, but it's still not that much money that I've been able to spend on this, and it's hard to find. I have to be very um, careful with how much I spend, and I've got a development team in India, and it is very difficult to manage the the barriers with language, um, the barriers with just you know my expectations are relatively high. I understand that, but managing that process and thinking about, like, okay, if I, and this is the challenge with this, and I want to be open, if I switch developers, am I going to lose a significant amount of competence with it? Right. So right now, the development team I have a long-standing relationship with, but I mean, it's sort of a challenging thing, right? Where you are thinking about um, you're thinking about when things are not sort of going as planned. Um, you know, is it worth your time and effort to switch to somebody else or another development agency when you know, when it doesn't look as planned? And that's where I want to sort of stand with this. And I grapple with that because of the underlying competence that is developed and how long it actually sort of takes to get into something else. Um, and in, the other thing is thinking, like, hey, the grass is always greener, right? So, there's that saying, the grass is always greener on the other side, where you're always looking at something else and you're thinking, hey, well, why not get, wouldn't it be easier if that person was involved or that group was involved? Um, wouldn't that be sort of a cheaper alternative, right? And then I make this trade-off of their the development team is less expensive um, than a top tier team in the United States. A team in the United States is very expensive. It might cost a lot of money, um, and you might have the same struggles and the same problems that you go through, and it's not easy, right? And I think, like, this idea is not new. It's not something that um, lots of people, it's not something that lots of people don't experience in a day to day. But the challenge is like, how do you deal with that? Um, Ultimately, and the challenge too is I don't have the money to develop competency, in the sense of, creating, paying for education and things like that. I don't, right? It doesn't bring any money. Um, and I really grapple with how do I do this? Um, and it's the basic woes of the entrepreneur, right? Of how do I actually do this? And the answer, I think, ultimately, I can't, right? I can't with sort of comparing myself to what would be produced with a Google or what would be produced with, it's sort of brand name that everybody recognizes. I can't compare with them, and I can't compare with, ultimately, a development team that is in the US. There's some real strong competencies with some folks that are here. Um, and so ultimately, I have to figure out how to deal with this, um, and work with it, right? And realize that there are going to be a great deal of problems along the way, that and sort of frustrations where I'm like, well, this is a relatively easy task. I don't know why this is overtly complicated. Um, and that's I know I probably shouldn't be speaking out loud about this, but like that's the sort of battle that you face in your head. And then I think, is this worth paying my, money on? And, all of these things. The answer is, at this point, to all of those questions, no, right? Like the answer is, this is not worth my money. The answer is, um, I probably should find another development team and all that kind of stuff, but I don't have I don't have the money for it. I don't have, um, I finding good developers. It's possible, but you have to pay an awful lot of money. Um, and this is ultimately the sort of challenge that you face. So what I need to do, um, is hobble along, keep hobbling along. I don't know how else to deal with this other than to just hobble, um, and know that there is. I mean, we've done a lot, um, but going forward, I think that there's just a lot more that we can actually do. And man, it's just such a hobble. It's such a This is not great, um, and I wish I could do better. But ultimately, at this moment, I can't, and so I have to be okay with who I am. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.